My wife betrayed me, but when she found out who he really was, she was kidnapped, so I called the police. My name is Alex, and I never thought I'd be sharing my story here, but life has a way of throwing unexpected twists. I'm 35 years old, a software developer, and I've been married to my wonderful wife, Jane, for 10 years. Everything seemed perfect until one day I stumbled upon something that changed my life forever. It all started on a seemingly normal Saturday morning. I woke up early, as I usually do, to make breakfast for Jane and our two kids, Emma and Ryan. Emma is 8, a bright and curious girl who loves to read, while Ryan, 5, is a bundle of energy with a passion for dinosaurs. Jane was still asleep, so I took the opportunity to enjoy some quiet time with the kids. After breakfast, Jane joined us in the kitchen. Her hair tousled from sleep, but she still looked as beautiful as the day I met her. We chatted about our plans for the day. Jane wanted to go shopping for new clothes for the kids, and I planned to take them to the park afterward. Everything was normal, or so I thought. As Jane got ready, I decided to clean up the kitchen. I accidentally knocked over her phone, which was on the edge of the counter. When I picked it up, I noticed a notification from an unknown number. Curiosity got the best of me, and I opened the message. What I saw made my heart skip a beat. The message read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last time was amazing." My hands trembled as I tried to process what I had just read. Could Jane be having an affair? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the message was hard to ignore. I decided to keep it to myself for now and figure out a way to find out more. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Jane seemed her usual cheerful self, completely unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. We went shopping, and then I took the kids to the park, while Jane went to a meeting with her friends. I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing with possibilities. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I decided to confront Jane. I couldn't live with the doubt gnawing at me. I approached her calmly and showed her the message. Her reaction was unexpected. She burst into tears and admitted everything. She had been seeing someone else for the past 6 months. His name was Mark, and they met at a local gym. Jane explained that she felt neglected and lonely because of my long hours at work. She insisted that she still loved me but didn't know how to deal with her feelings. I was devastated. The woman I loved and trusted had betrayed me, and I didn't know how to handle it. We decided to go to marriage counseling to try and salvage our relationship. The sessions were difficult, but they forced us to communicate openly about our feelings and fears. Jane apologized repeatedly and promised to end things with Mark. I wanted to believe her, but the trust was shattered. A few weeks later, I noticed Jane becoming distant again. She spent more time on her phone and often left the house for errands. My suspicions grew, and I decided to follow her one day. What I discovered was more shocking than I could have imagined. Jane wasn't just meeting Mark, she was involved in something far more dangerous. I followed her to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Through a broken window, I saw her and Mark with a group of people exchanging money and packages. It looked like a drug deal. I couldn't believe my eyes. My wife was not only cheating on me, but also involved in illegal activities. I took some photos as evidence and left, my mind reeling. That night, I confronted Jane again, showing her the photos. She broke down and confessed that Mark had dragged her into the drug trade. She claimed she was scared to leave because he had threatened her and our family. I was furious and terrified for the safety of our children. We decided to go to the police. Jane agreed to cooperate in exchange for protection. The next few days were a whirlwind of police interviews and safety arrangements. Jane moved out temporarily to a safe house, and the kids and I stayed with my parents. The police launched an investigation and soon arrested Mark and his associates. Jane's testimony was crucial in bringing them down, but our marriage was in shambles. The kids were confused and scared, and I didn't know if I could ever trust Jane again. Months passed, and Jane returned home. We tried to rebuild our lives, but the strain was too much. We decided to separate, sharing custody of the kids. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it felt like the right one. Life as a single dad was challenging, but also rewarding. Emma and Ryan became my priority, and I focused on giving them a stable and loving home. Jane and I remained civil for the sake of the kids, but our relationship was never the same. Then, just as I thought things were settling down, another shock hit us. One evening I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold and menacing. They knew where we lived, where the kids went to school, and even details about my parents. It was clear that someone from Mark's network was still out there, seeking revenge. I immediately contacted the police, who advised us to move to a safe location. We were placed in a witness protection program, given new identities, and relocated to a different state. It was a difficult transition, but the safety of my children was paramount. Starting over in a new place was daunting. I had to find a new job, and the kids had to adjust to new schools. We were constantly looking over our shoulders, but gradually we began to find a sense of normalcy. I made friends with some of the neighbors, and the kids started to settle in. One day, while going through some old photos, I found a picture of Jane and me from our honeymoon. It brought back a flood of memories, good and bad. I realized that despite everything, I still had feelings for her. We had shared 10 years of our lives and had 2 beautiful children together. I decided to reach out to her. We started talking again, cautiously at first. Jane had been through her own struggles and was trying to rebuild her life. We both attended therapy separately and together, working through our issues. Slowly, we began to rebuild our relationship, this time with a foundation of honesty and trust. It's been a long and painful journey, but we're finally in a good place. Jane and I are back together, and the kids are happy. We still face challenges, but we've learned to communicate openly and support each other. Life will never be the same, but we've found a new sense of normalcy and hope for the future. Just as we thought our lives were beginning to stabilize, another storm was brewing on the horizon. We had been in our new location for about a year, and while things were far from perfect, we had managed to create a semblance of normalcy. Jane and I were cautiously rebuilding our relationship, and the kids were starting to adjust to their new surroundings. However, the shadow of our past was never far behind. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I received an unexpected visit from an old friend, Mike. Mike and I had been close in college, but we had lost touch over the years. Seeing him at my doorstep was a shock, but what he had to say was even more startling. He had been contacted by someone from Mark's network, who was still seeking revenge. Mike warned me that they were closing in on our new location and that we needed to be prepared for anything. The next few days were a blur of fear and paranoia. We notified the authorities, who increased our protection and advised us to stay vigilant. Jane and I were constantly on edge, worried about the safety of our children. Emma and Ryan sensed the tension but didn't fully understand the danger we were in. We tried to keep things as normal as possible for them, but the looming threat was always in the back of our minds. One night, just as we were getting ready for bed, we heard a noise outside. I grabbed a baseball bat and cautiously made my way to the front door. To my horror, I found a threatening note pinned to the door with a knife. The note simply read, "You can't hide forever." My heart raced as I realized that our enemies were closer than we thought. The police were called, and they advised us to move once again. It was disheartening to think that we had to uproot our lives for a second time, but our safety was paramount. We packed up our belongings and left under the cover of night, not telling anyone where we were going. Our new destination was a small town in the middle of nowhere, chosen for its isolation and low crime rate. Starting over again was exhausting, but we had no choice. We found a modest house and enrolled the kids in a new school. Jane and I both found jobs, and we did our best to blend in with the local community. The people were friendly, but we kept our distance, afraid of forming close relationships that could put others in danger. Despite our efforts to stay under the radar, strange things began to happen. We noticed cars following us, and there were mysterious phone calls with no one on the other end. It was clear that our pursuers were still on our trail. We couldn't live like this forever, constantly looking over our shoulders. We needed a plan to end this once and for all. Jane suggested reaching out to her brother, Paul, who was a former military officer and now worked in private security. Paul was tough, resourceful, and had connections that could help us. Reluctantly, I agreed, and we contacted Paul, explaining our situation. He arrived within a few days, ready to help us confront our enemies. Paul's presence was a game changer. He assessed our security measures and made significant improvements. He also devised a plan to lure our enemies out into the open. It was risky, but we were desperate for a resolution. We decided to stage a fake move, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead our pursuers to a remote location where Paul and his team would be waiting. The day of the operation was tense. We pretended to pack up and leave, making sure to be seen by our watchers. We drove to the designated location, a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town, and waited. Sure enough, our enemies followed us. Paul and his team sprang into action, apprehending the men who had been terrorizing us. The confrontation was intense. The men were armed and dangerous, but Paul's team was prepared. There was a brief firefight, but in the end, Paul and his team emerged victorious, capturing the leaders of the group. The police arrived shortly after and took the men into custody. We finally felt a sense of relief, knowing that the immediate threat was over. However, the victory was bittersweet. We knew that these men were just part of a larger network, and there were still others out there who might come after us. But for now, we could breathe a little easier. The authorities assured us that they would continue to investigate and dismantle the criminal organization that had caused us so much pain. With the immediate danger behind us, we tried to rebuild our lives once more. Paul stayed with us for a while, helping us adjust and providing much-needed support. His presence was a comfort, especially for the kids, who looked up to him as a hero. Jane and I continued our therapy, working through the trauma and trying to strengthen our bond. Months passed, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The kids excelled in school, making new friends and finding happiness in their new environment. Jane and I found solace in each other, rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of trust and honesty. We still had our struggles, but we faced them together, determined to create a better future for our family. Just as we thought we had left the worst behind, another shockwave hit us. One evening, Jane received a call from a detective involved in the case against Mark's network. They had discovered evidence linking Mark to a series of unsolved murders. It turned out that Mark wasn't just a small-time criminal, he was a cold-blooded killer. The detective warned us that Mark's associates might still be out there, seeking revenge for his arrest. The news was devastating. We had been through so much already, and now we had to face the possibility of more danger. But this time, we were better prepared. Paul helped us enhance our security measures, and we stayed in close contact with the authorities. We also joined a support group for victims of crime, finding strength in the stories of others who had faced similar challenges. As the weeks went by, we noticed something strange. Jane began receiving anonymous letters, each one containing cryptic messages and unsettling threats. It was clear that someone was trying to intimidate us. The police investigated, but the letters were untraceable. The fear and paranoia returned, making it difficult to focus on anything else. One day, while Jane was at work and the kids were at school, I received a package in the mail. It had no return address, and when I opened it, I found a USB drive inside. Hesitant but curious, I plugged it into my computer. What I saw chilled me to the bone. The drive contained videos of our family recorded without our knowledge. Someone had been watching us, documenting our every move. I immediately called the police and Jane. The authorities arrived quickly, and Jane rushed home terrified. The videos were disturbing, showing us in our most vulnerable moments. It was clear that our stalker had been inside our home, and we had no idea who it was or how they had managed to evade our security. The police launched a full-scale investigation, but leads were scarce. We felt trapped, constantly on edge, knowing that someone was out there watching us. We increased our security even further, installing cameras and alarms, but the sense of violation was hard to shake. Then, one night, everything came to a head. Jane and I were woken by the sound of breaking glass. I grabbed my baseball bat and rushed downstairs to find a masked intruder in our living room. He was armed and dangerous, but adrenaline and fear gave me the strength to fight back. We struggled, and in the chaos, the intruder managed to escape, leaving behind a trail of blood. The police arrived quickly, and a manhunt was launched. The intruder's blood provided a DNA match, and it turned out he was one of Mark's associates who had managed to evade capture. He had been stalking us, waiting for the right moment to strike. The authorities assured us that they would catch him, but the encounter left us shaken to our core. With the immediate danger once again neutralized, we tried to pick up the pieces. The kids were scared but resilient, and Jane and I did our best to reassure them. We continued our therapy and support group meetings, finding strength in our community. Paul stayed with us for a while longer, his presence a constant reminder of the importance of family and support. Years passed, and the memories of those harrowing days began to fade. We moved to a new home in a different state, hoping for a fresh start. The kids grew up, and life gradually returned to normal. Jane and I found happiness together, our bond stronger than ever. But the past has a way of catching up with you. One day, as I was going through some old files, I came across a letter that had been tucked away in a forgotten drawer. It was from Mark, written before his arrest. In it, he detailed a plan to escape and seek revenge on those who had betrayed him. The letter was chilling, a stark reminder of the darkness that had once overshadowed our lives. I showed the letter to Jane, and we decided to take it to the authorities. They assured us that Mark was securely behind bars, but the letter reignited old fears. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that our past was never truly behind us. In the end, we learned to live with the uncertainty. We couldn't change what had happened, but we could control how we responded. We chose to focus on the positive, to cherish our time together, and to protect our family at all costs. Our journey was far from over, but we faced each challenge with courage and resilience. We had been through hell and back, but we emerged stronger, united by love and determination. No matter what the future held, we knew we could face it together. And so, we continued to live our lives, always looking forward but never forgetting the lessons of the past. We found strength in each other, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Our story was one of survival, of overcoming adversity, and of finding hope in the darkest of times. As the years went by, our lives slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. But the scars of the past were never far from the surface. The children grew up, Jane and I found a deeper understanding of each other, and we tried to leave behind the shadow of our previous lives. However, life had other plans for us, and another storm was brewing on the horizon. It was the summer of 2027 when everything started to unravel again. Emma was now 15, a bright and talented teenager with a passion for art. Ryan, at 12, was a budding athlete, excelling in soccer and always full of energy. Jane and I had found stable jobs, and we had managed to build a peaceful life in our new home. But the tranquility was about to be shattered once more. One evening, Jane came home from work looking unusually tense. She handed me a letter she had found in our mailbox. It was addressed to both of us, but there was no return address. I opened it and felt a chill run down my spine. The letter contained a single line. "You thought you were safe, but the past never forgets." We immediately contacted the authorities, who advised us to stay vigilant and promised to increase surveillance around our home. We had been through so much already, and the thought of facing another threat was almost unbearable. We tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the sake of the kids, but the fear was always there, lurking in the background. A few weeks later, Emma began to withdraw from us. She spent more time alone in her room, often with the door locked. When we asked her if something was wrong, she brushed it off, saying she was just stressed about school. Jane and I were concerned, but we didn't want to push her too hard. We decided to give her some space, hoping she would come to us if she needed help. Then, one night, Emma didn't come home. She had told us she was going to a friend's house for a study session, but when we called her friend's parents, they said she had never shown up. Panic set in, and we immediately called the police. A search was launched, but there were no leads. Emma had vanished without a trace. The days that followed were a nightmare. Jane and I were beside ourselves with worry, and Ryan was scared and confused. The police did everything they could, but there were no clues as to Emma's whereabouts. It was as if she had simply disappeared off the face of the earth. Our once peaceful home was now filled with fear and uncertainty. Weeks turned into months, and still there was no sign of Emma. The strain took a toll on our family. Jane and I grew distant, each of us lost in our own grief and guilt. Ryan became more withdrawn, and his school performance suffered. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming, and we began to fear the worst. Then one evening we received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold and mechanical, distorted by some sort of voice changer. They claimed to know where Emma was and demanded a large sum of money for her safe return. The call was brief, and they hung up before we could ask any questions. We contacted the police, who advised us to follow their instructions carefully. A plan was devised to deliver the ransom money, with undercover officers monitoring the exchange. Jane and I were terrified, but we were willing to do anything to get Emma back. The day of the exchange arrived, and I drove to the designated location with a bag of money. The tension was unbearable as I waited, scanning the area for any sign of Emma or her captors. After what felt like an eternity, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, dressed in dark clothing with his face obscured by a hood. He approached cautiously, and I handed over the money as instructed. He took the bag and disappeared into the night without a word. The police, who had been monitoring the exchange, moved in but were unable to apprehend him. It was another dead end, and Emma was still missing. Days turned into weeks, and there was no further contact from the kidnappers. The police continued their investigation, but leads were scarce. Jane and I were living in a state of constant fear and uncertainty, holding on to the hope that Emma was still alive. Then, one morning we received a package in the mail. Inside was a USB drive, similar to the one we had received years ago. With trembling hands, I plugged it into the computer and opened the files. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were videos of Emma, tied up and blindfolded, clearly distressed but seemingly unharmed. The accompanying note read, "This is just a reminder. Do not involve the police again or she will pay the price." We were devastated but relieved to see that Emma was still alive. The police advised us to comply with the kidnappers' demands to ensure her safety. However, as time passed, the demands became more erratic and impossible to fulfill. The situation seemed hopeless, and we were running out of options. One night, as I was going through old family photos, trying to hold on to some semblance of hope, I found a hidden compartment in one of the photo albums. Inside was a letter from Emma. It was dated a few weeks before she disappeared and detailed her suspicions that someone was following her. She had kept it hidden, not wanting to worry us, but now it seemed like a crucial piece of the puzzle. We shared the letter with the police, who began to dig deeper into Emma's life. They discovered that she had been corresponding with someone online, someone who had gained her trust and then manipulated her into meeting them. This person was linked to Mark's network, and it became clear that Emma's disappearance was part of a larger scheme of revenge. The authorities intensified their efforts, and finally a breakthrough came. They traced the online interactions to a remote location in a neighboring state. A rescue operation was launched, and after a tense standoff, Emma was found and brought back home. She was shaken and traumatized, but alive. The reunion was emotional and overwhelming. Emma had been through so much, and it would take time for her to heal. We all needed time to heal. The police assured us that the people responsible were in custody and that the immediate threat was over, but the scars would remain. In the months that followed, we focused on rebuilding our lives. Emma underwent therapy to deal with the trauma, and we all attended family counseling. Jane and I worked hard to repair our relationship, supporting each other through the difficult times. Ryan, too, needed support to process everything that had happened. Slowly but surely, we began to find our way back to a new normal. The kids returned to school, and Jane and I resumed our jobs. We moved to yet another new home, hoping for a fresh start and a chance to leave the past behind. It wasn't easy, but we were determined to create a safe and loving environment for our family. One day, as I was walking through the park with Emma and Ryan, I realized how far we had come. Despite everything we had been through, we were still standing, still fighting for each other. Our journey was far from over, but we had learned the importance of resilience and the power of family. Just as we thought we had finally found peace, another twist shook our world. Paul, who had been our rock through the most challenging times, went missing. He had been working on a new security contract and hadn't been heard from in days. We were frantic with worry, knowing that his disappearance was likely connected to the same network that had targeted us. The police launched a search, but leads were scarce. It seemed as if Paul had vanished without a trace, just like Emma had. The fear and uncertainty returned, and we were left to grapple with the possibility that we might never see him again. The investigator shared everything he had learned, including the identities of key players in the criminal organization. Armed with this new information, we worked closely with the authorities to plan a coordinated effort to dismantle the network and find Paul. The operation was risky, but we were determined to bring Paul back and end the threat once and for all. Jane and I were involved every step of the way, working with law enforcement and the private investigator to track down leads and piece together the puzzle. Finally, after months of searching, we located the hideout where Paul was being held. The rescue mission was intense, with a fierce battle between law enforcement and the criminals. But in the end, we prevailed, and Paul was rescued. Paul was severely injured and traumatized, but he was alive. The reunion was emotional and filled with relief. We brought him home, and once again, our family began the slow process of healing. The authorities continued to pursue the remaining members of the criminal organization, and over time, the threat diminished. We knew that there would always be risks, but we were stronger and more united than ever before. As the years went by, we focused on creating a stable and loving environment for our family. Emma and Ryan grew into remarkable young adults, resilient and compassionate. Jane and I found a deeper understanding of each other, and our bond grew stronger with each passing day. Our journey had been long and filled with unimaginable challenges, but we had faced them together. The love and support of our family had carried us through the darkest times, and we had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. In the end, we learned that no matter what life throws at you, the strength of your family and the power of love can overcome even the greatest obstacles. Our story was one of survival, resilience, and unwavering hope. And as we looked to the future, we knew that we could face anything as long as we had each other.